Hey Jack, welcome to Just a Catholic Convert. This is going to be my first long form episode, and because of the results of the poll that I posted on my YouTube channel, today I'm talking to you about my conversion story. This is going to be unfiltered, it's not polished, it's just what I want to tell you. How did we get here? How did we become a Catholic convert? It's not the highlight reel, this is the real one. So let's begin. When I was 16, my mom had died. Up until that point, I was a pretty faithful Christian. I was homeschooled, I was baptized in the Church of Christ in Augusta, Maine. Church was something I remember going to, but I don't think it was something we did every Sunday. And we eventually moved overseas with my dad's military orders. We lived in the Middle East for 3 years, and I remember going to church maybe once or twice while we were there. While we were there, my mom got her cancer diagnosis. And our family eventually did a 180. When we returned to the States, it was church every Sunday. It was only Christian music on the radio. There was no video games rated above teen, and I embraced this Christian upbringing with my own spin on it. I was a huge history nerd. I reenacted the American Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the French and Indian War, through a youth reenactment group made up of fellow homeschool Christians. Faith and history became deeply connected for me. Prayer, hope, trust that God would heal my mom became the center of my early life. Personally, I was very serious about my faith. I didn't believe in dating. Call me old school, but I was heavily influenced by the 18th century. And I believed in saving my first kiss for my wedding day. I remember asking my mom at 16 if I could go to a football game with a girl from church. She said, I thought we didn't believe in dating. That wasn't her rule, and it wasn't a family rule. This was something that was self-imposed by me. I truly believed that God rewarded faithfulness. So when she died, something broke. I was angry. When you lose a parent at any age, your world changes. At 16, it changed everything for me. I felt like God hadn't kept his end of the bargain. We prayed, we trusted, we believed. I remember going to church and seeing the deacons putting their hands on my mom and using oils like it talks about in the Bible in order to heal her. And when she died, I decided I didn't need him anymore. Very quickly, I did everything I once resisted. I got a girlfriend. I crossed lines I had sworn I would never cross. And once you ring certain bells, well, they can't be unrung. For the next decade, I lived in tension. I wanted to love God, but I was angry at him. I remember saying, I have to believe in God because if I don't, then I'm just angry at nothing. I wasn't an atheist. I was just very wounded. My first Catholic encounter came from a family we knew that we met through my mom's cancer treatments. They loved the Lord of the Rings. I remember running into the woods playing soldier with them and slaying many orcs together. They were normal, they were good people. But I do distinctly remember my mom commenting during car rides that they had crucifixes and they had images of Mary, but they were Christians, but they were different. And that idea sort of stuck with me. Now, my identity has always been wrapped into going deep into the study of things I'm interested in, and I loved playing video games. Not just playing them, but studying them. One game that had a huge impact on me was Crusader Kings 2 by Paradox Interactive. In that game, you create a character and you develop traits over time. Traits like patience, humility, piety, generosity. You can even develop vices like pride and cravenness. I named the characters after myself, but something hit me. The digital version of me was virtuous. The real version of me wasn't. I remember asking myself, if I had a character card, the real me, what would it say? What traits would I have? What vices? And how have the choices shaped who I've become? And in that game, if you were a Christian in medieval Europe, of course, one of the largest traits is that, well, you were Catholic. Now, the Crusades also had a big influence on me. I remember the movie Kingdom of Heaven by Ridley Scott. There's a line in that film that goes, holiness is in right action. That line stayed with me. I also remember there's another line in the film that says, what God desires is here and here. And what you decide to do every day, you will be a good man. Or not. Now, like I said before, between 2005 and 2007, we lived in the Middle East. We lived in Bahrain. And we had traveled all across to Jordan and Israel and Egypt. Christians, Muslims, and Jews living side by side, this wasn't something that was abstract to me. It was something that I had seen. I became fascinated with this medieval Christian world and its crusader states that were established. But at this point, it was just an interest. It hadn't developed into anything more. Now, come 2018, while I was in college in Virginia, I went to my first Catholic Mass. The church was surrounded by the mountains with the stone exterior, and it felt ancient. When I walked in, people were kneeling. And I remember doing that as a kid, even in the Church of Christ. You know, of course, we didn't have any instruments or anything like that. It was all a cappella. But during high school, I would go to a Baptist church. And it was one of those mega churches with the drum kits, the smoke machine, and the laser light show. And so that was a huge contrast from a cappella Church of Christ. And yet, here in the Mass, something kind of felt like home. The Mass wasn't flashy. There was a piano and a violin and a flute, which was new to me, but it was reverent, it was structured, it was peaceful. After experiencing megachurch environments, this felt grounded. I didn't understand everything that was going on in the Mass, but I felt seen, not judged. I went a couple more times, scattered here and there, but then I stopped, because curiosity isn't conversion. Now in 2021, I couldn't shake the questions anymore. I told my sister I was thinking about becoming Catholic, and to my surprise, she was very supportive. She connected me with her youth pastor from 20 years before, when she went to a Baptist church, and she was in high school. My sister is 11 years older than I am. And I thought to myself, yeah, why wouldn't I reach out to the Baptist youth pastor from 20 years ago if I was interested in the Catholic faith? But to my shock, he also was encouraging me to continue on this faith journey. And so he gave me book recommendations, and I bought them. And then I let them sit because I'm a procrastinator. I didn't open them until November of 2021, so later on that year. And finally, the first one I picked up was the Didache. This is the teachings of the apostles before the Bible was compiled. And something hit me hard. Jesus gave authority to the apostles, the keys, the binding and loosing, and most importantly, the authority to forgive sins. If that authority was real, when did it disappear? And who decided that it had disappeared? That question had been lingering with me for a long time, and it began to sort of change me. Now, at the time, I was dating somebody, and I told her, I think I'm going to become Catholic. And she said, okay, I'll become Catholic too, sort of nonchalantly. And in that moment, I realized this couldn't be about me leading someone else. I wasn't even convinced yet. So I ended up ending that relationship. At the time, I tried to reinvent my life. I had switched jobs. I was thinking about becoming a teacher and leaving government work altogether. I had moved into an apartment. I was renting out my house, but none of that worked out. And in June of 2023, I moved back into my home, alone, since my roommate had moved out, and it was still. And the question about Catholicism had lingered. So in August of 2023, I signed up for RCIA, what is now OCIA. Then I missed the first class. Not entirely by accident. I started making excuses. That's when something happened. Something I can only describe in a moment I couldn't ignore. I saw my first miracle. I saw several miracles in my conversion story, and if I'm being honest, I wouldn't have converted had I not been witness to these miracles. That's not to say that if you are going through a conversion story and you don't see miracles that you shouldn't convert, but God knows our hearts and He knows our needs. So if you'll indulge me, I will share a little bit about those miracles. So like I said, I had signed up for RCIA, but I had missed the first day of class. I found myself sitting at the local car dealership, and I was waiting for my oil change, reading Catholicism by Bishop Robert Barron. I'm maybe 2 or 3 pages in, and suddenly I smelled what was the scent of the incense that we burn at church. I looked around, and there wasn't anybody there. Nobody had walked by. Nobody was wearing strong perfume. It was sort of eerie and strange. I was like, oh, that's weird, but I shrugged it off, blew it off, whatever. So I continued to read. I get maybe 2 or 3 more pages in, and I have that sense come over me again, that smell of the incense at church. It almost seemed like it was emanating out of the pages of the book. I remember having the thought of going like, this book was owned by somebody else, and that maybe they'd like brought it around some incense or something. But no, I had taken the plastic wrapping off of the book. It was a brand new book. And so I was blown away by this. And eventually I relented, and I said, fine, I'll go to the stupid class, is what I said. So the next class period, I went, And from there, I was reading the Faith Explained book. I had an entire ritual that I had developed that involved me burning incense to sort of get into that mindset. And I would do some prayers out of a prayer book that they gave us out of class. I would meditate on an icon that an Orthodox friend had given me. And then I would read the Faith Explained book, sort of really delve into the mystery of what is this thing called Catholicism. And so, after several months, I realized that I was going to Mass. I was actually doing daily Mass through all of Advent of 2023. But I didn't know any Catholics. The Catholics I mentioned earlier, I was over a decade before. I had long lost contact with them. So one day, I was coming out of a daily Mass. It was a Thursday morning. And one of the guys who saw me and had been there for a couple of days, he invites me to come to coffee. Of course, I say no, I'm going to work. But then I decided, no, you know what? I'm going to turn around and I'm going to say yes. So I turn around and I say, actually, yes, I will go to coffee. Where are we going? And he points to the rectory right next to the church. He goes, right in here. That was my first time going in a rectory. That was my first time really meeting a priest. And I get to share my story of the fact that I was converting with all of these men who were there supporting me. And it was from there that I got invited to caroling. And then from there, I got invited to Vespers. I got involved in the youth drama club. I was volunteering and I was at the church every second that I could get. And it was amazing to be able to build up that community. So if you're on a conversion story, well, I will encourage you that, when you're in your local parish, don't just go to the RCIA or what is now OCIA class. Don't just go to Mass on Sundays. Try to join the community. Get into the bulletin and take a look. I know that it might be a daunting task, but you're more than welcome to participate. You don't have to be a Catholic to do Catholic things, right? We want you to join the community. If you want to join the church, community is part of that. You're not joining a belief system alone. You're joining the body of Christ. If you have any pushback, reach out to me. I'll go talk to whoever I need to make sure that you feel welcome in your conversion story, because nobody should feel like when they're on this journey alone. Now, I'll get back to my conversion story. So that New Year's Eve, I attended a bunch of masses because I couldn't take Eucharist and I didn't have anything better to do. And so the midnight mass, the priest asked me, were you at every mass today? And I said, Father, I was at the 7:30, the 9 o'clock, the 10:45, the 5 p.m. Unfortunately, I missed the 12:30 mass. And he laughed at that. But that should go to show you not about my commitment to the Mass, but really the loneliness I was experiencing. I was just trying to find meaning, trying to find why I was here. What is the purpose of our lives? So if I can fast forward a little bit further, I was listening to Shameless Popery podcasts every day. I was listening to them on my commute to work and on my commute from work. Answering questions like, what do Protestants get wrong about Mary? What do Protestants get wrong about the Eucharist? What is the true Christmas story? All of these things that were answering the questions that weren't being answered for me in the Faith Explained book. I can honestly say that if it wasn't for Shameless Popery, I would not become a Catholic. And so I owe him a great debt for the fact that he was able to explain things, I feel, fairly charitably on the Protestant side, and yet presenting that the Catholic argument is a stronger argument. Understanding the canon, understanding the liturgies, understanding doctrines and dogmas and all of those things, that was necessary, and it was that added benefit on top of the Faith Explained book. But now we get to my second miracle, and that is my first confession. As I said earlier, I was baptized at the age of 7, and at the time of my first confession, I was 27. So we're 20 years of sins that for the first bit, I was doing pretty well. But after my mom's death, I was a really, really, really good sinner. And it is only after becoming Catholic I realized how great of a sinner I really am. Conversion isn't a single moment. It is an ongoing process. So from there, I go to adoration. I bring a legal notepad with me in order to go through all of my sins, and I do an examination of conscience. I had listened to, I think it was a snippet out of Pints of the Aquinas when he was talking about the theology of the body. And the speaker was talking about how if you're going to do an examination of conscience, go with Christ. So I would encourage all of you that if you're getting ready for your first confession, go with Christ. Go to adoration. Don't go it alone. It's a dark place to go and evaluate all of the evil that we've created, all of the sin that we have done. But Christ is the light of the world, and he will enlighten you, and he will comfort you. And it's a hard thing to do, but it is so worth it. And he wants to be there with you, and he wants to take that burden from you. So I end up writing about 2, maybe 2.5 pages worth of sins. I think that was pretty good for 20 years. And then I get ready to go to my first confession. I was so excited. I did it before the rehearsal day, which is the day that the church, sort of the program for RCI had set up. So like, hey, we're going to do confessions on rehearsal for the Easter Vigil. I was like, I got to go earlier. And I remember asking the priest, like, can I go before? Now, that's not broad guidance for all of you. Stick with your programs. If you're in OCIA right now, stick to what your OCIA director tells you or what your pastor tells you. But if you are curious and you have that desire, then maybe approach the director or your pastor and ask them if it would be all right for you to do confession before the rehearsal. Now, I had already gotten the okay, and so I went to my first confession. I was an evening confession at a church semi-local to here, but not my parish. I make the joke to say that I take my really bad sins to other parishes and I leave my good sins for my priests, and that's mostly a joke. My priests know I've done face-to-face confessions of some of the worst sins I've ever committed with my pastor, so I'm sitting there at the bench, and this church, if I can describe it to you, is octagonally shaped, kind of like a stop sign. And the interior side has these pillars and these archways. And then the exterior side, of course, is then the walls around. And on the back side is the bench. And then there's a little alcove where the confessionals are. Now, when I was sitting there in the back of this bench, in the back of this church, I was the second person in line. And I remember asking the person beside me, I said, hey, is this scary in there? And she looked at me like I had a horn growing out of my head. But I told her, I said, this is my first confession. And she was like, oh, no, you'll be fine. You'll do fine. While I'm sitting there, I noticed too that the exterior part of the church, I'm still inside, but it's exterior from the columns and the archways, well, it's all dark. And the alcove where the confessionals are, it's all dark. But the interior part, the part where the altar is, inside the archways, well, that's lit up. So I go into the confessional. I think I get it done in maybe 5-6 minutes. Again, it's so important to do an examination of conscience beforehand. Have that list of sins that you are ready to bring before the Lord and have that contrition. Now, I knew that I needed a sign. I needed this to be more than me just going telling some dude about my sins. And God knew that I needed that. Again, the confessional is totally valid even if you have no sense emotion, no elation, right, or deep sorrow. It is valid forgiveness. And that is the beauty of the Catholic faith. It's not about how you feel about God. God is God. He is consistent no matter what. But God knew that my first confession, I needed to feel something. Wow, the weight that is lifted off when you hear the words of absolution. I had felt lighter. That weight was gone. I also felt that my soul was brighter. Genuinely, I was like, I have to protect this. I can't sin anymore. I have to protect my soul. But when I stepped out of the confessional, they were getting ready to celebrate Mass. And they had turned all of the lights on in the church. That alcove, that exterior portion, everything was lit up. So not only did I feel lighter, and did my soul feel brighter, but my worldview was illuminated. It was beautiful. It was exactly what I needed. So after that, I go to the rehearsal a couple days later for the Easter Vigil for confirmation. And this I'll count as like a half of a miracle, all right? But essentially, I'm standing before the altar. My sponsor is standing behind me. Is one of our deacons and, a great man. And as I'm standing there, face to face with the altar, I feel a push and a push and a push. And I half believed that it was Deacon who was playing a gag on me, and maybe it was. To this day, I can't confirm or figure out exactly, but I choose to believe, and I think it was the Holy Spirit. It was pushing me. If I recall, there was the first time I had done adoration. It was when I had mentioned about Vespers. And in that moment, I'll count this as another half miracle. So maybe together this becomes the third miracle. But I had never done adoration before, and I had just gotten done singing the Magnificat with that same deacon and one of our priests. And then they bring forth the Blessed Sacrament, and we go down on our knees on the tile, and I'm there, and I just had this sense. It's not a word. It's not a feeling. It was just sort of like this, I can't really describe it. A sense is probably the closest I can to a description of it, of just be, or remain, or stay. It was kind of like all of those things in one. It's an experience I can't explain, and I want that experience again. I haven't had it again, but again, I think it was God sort of like kicking me down the road, being like, hey, don't give up, keep pushing. So now we're getting up to the Easter Vigil Mass and my confirmation. I've had people ask me, at what point did you know that you were going to convert? And I was honest and said that not until the rehearsal. And I think that rehearsal was, maybe it was a week before, maybe it was only a couple of days before the Easter Vigil. I think it's a Monday, and of course Easter Vigil is on a Saturday. So a couple days before the Easter Vigil is when I finally was like, yes, I will become a Catholic. I had told my family that February that barring any strange religious practices, like every third Thursday the Catholics are sacrificing a pig, that my intentions were to become Catholic. But I only meant that sort of on a, hey guys, this is sort of coming along and maybe this will happen. But I wasn't committed until the rehearsal. But now I'm standing at the Easter Vigil, and it is such a beautiful liturgy. I feel a little robbed because by the time I had gotten into the church, all of the lights were on already. It was a long line. We had like 50 people who were in my class alone. It was amazing. So a ton of people who were receiving sacraments. But because of how long the line was, and I was in the back of the line, by the time I got in there, all the lights were on. So I didn't get to experience the darkness and the candles and all that. And I don't want to spoil it for you. If you haven't witnessed an Easter Vigil Mass, I would strongly encourage you to go to it. But now I get confirmation. I get First Communion. The sacraments and the graces, they're overflowing. My dad is there. My brother-in-law and one of my nieces is there. My Jewish friend from work, he said that he wanted to come and support me, and I'm so grateful that he did. And then I have two friends who I made that were Catholic. They were also there. So I had Catholics, I had a Jew, I had Protestant family that were all in one pew here at this Easter Vigil. I didn't tell this part of the story, but my dad is a deacon in a Baptist church. We have some very interesting theological conversations, as you might be able to imagine. But now, I look over, and throughout the liturgy, he's not following along in the missal. The Lord's Prayer comes up, and he doesn't pray the Lord's Prayer. Stoically, he stands there. And, that was a little jarring for me, a little shocking. But he's on his own faith journey, and we all have to respect that. There's a reason I'm telling you this. So after the Easter Vigil ends, and my dad hugs me, he says he's proud of me, and he leaves the church. He says, my brother-in-law, he leaves with my niece, and my Jewish buddy, he leaves. And then I get a text message from my dad, and he says, hey, bud, I just face planted in the parking lot of the church. Oh my gosh. I messaged him, are you okay? Like, is everything all right? And he responds with, yes, it was actually kind of a funny story. I'll tell you about it the next time that I see you. And I was like, are you sure you're okay? And so he's like, yeah, it's fine. Well, so I'm now traveling for work and all sorts of things. And I don't see my dad for about a month. But when we do get together again and we're getting lunch, I ask him, so what happened? He retells the story as if it had happened the day prior. He tells me that he left the church. It was raining on that particular evening. So the parking lot was wet and the ground was wet, sidewalk and everything. And he tries to walk around a family that's pushing a stroller. And he says that there were these chains, like this chain fence or something. I don't recall where this chain fence might be at the church. But he says that he tripped over this fence and he face planted and he busted his upper lip. And he had been wearing a suit because it's the Easter Vigil. And he was like, I knew there was going to be mud all up and down my suit. He was like, I knew that my lip was going to be busted up for a whole week. But he says when he rose, he didn't have a single stain on his suit. And the next morning when he woke up, his lip was completely healed. And I jokingly told him face to face, I said, well, Dad, you went through an entire Mass and you didn't even say the Lord's Prayer. And I said, you know what we call that when we lay down on all fours? So we call it prostrating ourselves. I think there was a level of humility there, and he laughed. And he didn't seem shocked. He didn't want to fight me on it. He just sort of acknowledged that this was an experience that he had. And so I share this for the confirmation of that. But also, I'm talking with my Jewish buddy who had said he had been to a Baptist service before. He'd been to an Anglican service before. Then when I asked him, what did you think of the Mass? His response was, well, it was surprisingly Jewish. As it should be, because it's the part two. We're the continuation. We're the branch that has been grafted onto the tree. That was confirmation for me as well. And so I tell you this story because I want you guys to know that wherever you are in your faith journey, whether you're curious about Catholicism, whether it's an intellectual pursuit, or maybe you feel that pull that you have to stop fighting, at the end of the day, it's about saying yes. It's about taking that first step. Say yes to the invitation of coffee. Say yes to the invitation to RCIA or OCIA. Say yes when you get the opportunity to chat with a Catholic friend. Ask those questions. I will warn you guys that unfortunately, because religious education ends at about 8th grade for most Catholics, that sadly there are a lot of poorly catechized Catholics out there. I would say that as a convert in adult catechesis, they're not going to get a better source. And also I would encourage every Catholic that's out there, go to OCIA, go to a class, get a refresher course. You can go to OCIA even if you're already a Catholic. It's not the conversion course. It is catechetical courses. It is how to be catechized, how to learn about the faith. I would encourage every single person out there, whether you're curious about Catholicism, whether you want to convert, or whether you've been a Catholic your whole life, go to OCIA. Engage with your friends, engage with your community. Those are the things that I can encourage you to do. And most importantly, God is always the first mover. He is the one that is calling us back to himself. He's the one that calls us back onto the road that leads to him. He calls us for conversion. He calls us to repentance. He calls us to go to Mass in the days when we don't want to. He's calling you now. Finally answer that call. All you have to do is submit to his will. Whatever that is for you, he will make it clear if you just ask him. So, on this day is the feast of Saint Joseph. And I am reminded that Joseph doesn't say anything in the Bible. We know that he's got questions and he's got concerns, all that kind of stuff, but there's no direct quotes from Saint Joseph. The silent worker. This is a reminder for all of us that we need to be vigilant, we need to be hardworking, and sometimes, though, we need to be silent. I say that after I just told you guys my whole conversion story, but I hope that what you take away from this is that it was God who is always working within us. So, to end this, I hope you guys are encouraged. I hope you guys come back for more episodes, more videos. Enjoy the shorts, my Practical Catholicism series. Saint Joseph, pray for us. I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for listening, and God bless.